Hey everyone, I'm Equindio and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a really critical briefing for international observers, policymakers, and those of you who track this stuff closely. We're zeroing in on one of the most pressing geopolitical dilemmas right now, how states actually respond to rising extremism and banditry. Specifically, we're going to unpack a fascinating, real-time comparative case study between two West African nations. They are facing a nearly identical threat, but their state security responses, they are drastically different.
Okay. Let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the human cost of banditry. 2, Nigeria's appeasement strategy. 3, Burkina Faso's tactical conscription. 4, diagnosing the ideological threat. 5, the ethics of state security. And finally, number 6, the citizen's ultimatum.
Section 1. The human cost of banditry. Before we get lost in the high-level policy debates, we absolutely have to ground this in reality. We aren't just talking about abstract numbers here. These are devastating daily realities for local citizens. And to put the scale of this into perspective, these disruptions are happening across vast forested territories that are literally larger than some European countries. For example, in Oyo, 2 volunteers were killed just trying to negotiate the release of schoolchildren and their teachers. Over in Zamfara, female travelers were kidnapped and humiliated on camera. And in a really chilling example of how this shatters the local economy and agriculture, a 56-year-old woman was brutally attacked on her farm right in front of her children. We have to keep this human cost front and center as we evaluate these policies, because at the end of the day, preventing this is exactly what state security is for.
And because of this constant terror, there's a pervasive sentiment echoing across the entire region. Citizens are simply tired of the attacks, the kidnappings, and the loss of loved ones. Public outcry is skyrocketing, and patience for the ongoing violence is basically non-existent now. That puts immense, immediate pressure on regional governments to figure this out.
Section 2. Nigeria. The appeasement strategy.
So let's look at Nigeria's playbook. A major advocate here is the well-known Islamic scholar Ahmad Gumi. The justification for this approach is essentially logistical. The argument is that the military just cannot physically fight every single criminal hiding out in these massive forests. So the strategy leans super heavily into dialogue. It means visiting bandit camps, pushing for negotiation, and aiming for rehabilitation. But as you might guess, the pushback is fierce. Critics argue that by doing this without demanding legal consequences, the state is essentially glorifying extremist preachers and giving a legitimate cover to violent criminals.
And that leads right into the massive, long-term risk of this strategy. Check out this startling confession from a recent report by a former defense spokesperson talking about a repentant bandit. Quote, "I'll return to banditry if released." I mean, wow. It highlights that granting immunity or focusing only on rehabilitation carries a highly documented risk of recidivism. When the state gets lenient, the threat doesn't just magically disappear. Sometimes it's just waiting for a chance to strike again.
Section 3. Burkina Faso. Tactical conscription.
Now, let's look at a neighboring nation dealing with the exact same kind of insurgency, but taking a radically different approach. Burkina Faso's forces moved incredibly fast when dealing with an imam caught preaching violence. Let's break it down. Step 1, no negotiation. They just moved in and arrested the extremist imam. Step 2, when his followers, who reports literally described as wannabe jihadists, took to the streets to protest, the state didn't just disperse them. They arrested them too. Step 3, they hauled those individuals to a military camp for short-term military training. And Step 4, the absolute kicker here, they deployed those exact followers as foot soldiers to fight against the very terrorism they once supported, right on the front line. The sheer decisiveness is just staggering.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark divide we're talking about today. On one hand, you have Nigeria, which tolerates outspoken preachers, favors dialogue, and absorbs the risks of granting immunity. On the other hand, Burkina Faso arrests extremist leaders, forces their followers into conscription, and rapidly pushes them to the front lines. It is diplomacy versus blunt force.
Section 4. Diagnosing the ideological threat.
To really wrap our heads around why these strategies are so different, it helps to look at it through a medical lens. How does each state view the disease of extremism? Well, Nigeria approaches it like a chronic condition. They think it can be managed and cured over time. Social media users have even called these individuals prodigal sons, who just need dialogue to come back to the fold. Burkina Faso, they treat extremism like an aggressive tumor. There's no managing it. There's only suppression. They cut out the threat by literally weaponizing the proponents of violence against the violence itself.
And look,
This isn't just an academic debate happening in boardrooms. It has completely ignited public consciousness. In fact, this whole comparative analysis was sparked by a viral digital footprint. A social media user named Abdulaziz Dawet started a huge conversation about this. Seeing the swift, hardline approach in Burkina Faso acted like a mirror for Nigerian citizens, triggering massive online outrage among those who are deeply frustrated by their own government's leniency.
Section 5. Ethics of State Security.
Now, as impartial observers, we really need to pause and weigh the heavy moral implications of both of these options. Let's look at Nigeria's appeasement. The legal framework here relies heavily on unofficial dialogue and, quite frankly, a lack of prosecution. The big ethical concern is that it validates criminals and creates that massive risk of repeat offenses. Then you have Burkina Faso's conscription. The legal framework there is state-mandated detention and forced military training. The ethical concern, it's huge. It's a direct violation of standard civil liberties. Plus, tactically speaking, if their allegiances don't actually flip, you've just given free military training to potential insurgents.
So, I want to pose this directly to you to think about. Is it actually morally justifiable for a state to bypass standard judicial processes and force extremist leaders and their followers into involuntary military service? Does the urgent threat of terrorism basically override fundamental civil liberties?
But conversely, you have to ask the exact opposite question. Is a state playing with fire, like the social media commentators are warning, by letting extremist preachers speak freely, advocate for violence, and visit forest camps without any legal consequences? At what point does freedom of speech cross the line into active complicity in terror?
Section 6. The Citizen's Ultimatum.
For the people actually living through this nightmare, a lot of the high-level policy nuance has vanished. Following the massive online discourse from folks like Abdulaziz Dawet, it is clear that public patience with diplomacy is gone. Citizens feel the state is glorifying these preachers. They are incredibly frustrated when leaders refer to jihadists as their fighters. There's this widespread belief now that by negotiating, the state is actively breeding more prodigal sons instead of protecting innocent people. What we are seeing is a rapidly growing, incredibly vocal demand for decisive, unyielding action from the government.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful sentiment from everyday people. They are watching kidnappings and banditry spiral out of control at home, while neighboring nations are taking drastic measures. And the question they are asking their leaders is simple, but it carries so much weight. If they can do it there, why can't we do it here? It's a question that really forces all of us to sit back and ponder the ultimate cost of security and exactly what a state is willing to sacrifice to get it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next briefing.